Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today, we take a step back from the lore and talk about the facts of old 1st edition Rogue Trader. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. And of course, if you have any suggestions or any topics that you guys would like us to see cover, comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on Rogue Trader. The first edition of Warhammer 40K, known as Rogue Trader, was more of a small skirmish game, coupled with a role-playing game, where the composition of units were determined randomly by rolling dice, rather than building an army list before the game. The early game was heavily centered around the lore, rather than the rules of the game. There were no codices. Faction-centered rules weren't introduced until later, and they came in issues of White Dwarf. But the biggest difference of 1st edition 40K was the inclusion of a third player called a Game Master, a role very similar to the Dungeon Master of Dungeons & Dragons. Rogue Trader attempted to carry over most of the races from Games Workshop's Warhammer Fantasy line, with a space-themed twist in every one. A race of space dwarves was introduced, known as squads, but the race was removed from the lore of 40K after the 2nd edition, and was not mentioned again until the 6th edition's main rulebook, almost 20 years later. Currently, it seems that GW is reintroducing this long-forgotten race. We have a 40 facts video on the squat, and there's actually a playable squat model that's coming out for Necromunda. A race of space lizards was also introduced, known as Spaceland, but was later removed as a playable race. The Spacelands have been absent from 40K Universe for a while, but can still be found on small footnotes in modern lore. There is a 40 facts video on the Spaceland, as well as a 40 facts video on the old ones, which they kind of go hand in hand, so be sure to check that out. In the very beginning, chaos was not as prevalent in the game. It wasn't until later expansions of the game that the forces of chaos were introduced, with the original major chaos gods, Tzeentch, Khorne, Slaanesh, and Nurgle. But the expansions also allowed the Game Master to create his own gods and demons. The original lore of 40K also introduced the Sensei, immortal children, the Emperor Father during his thousands of years of life before he ascended the Golden Throne. They were champions of the cause of good. This theme was played around with in later novels, and the introduction of the Illuminati also comes from these older edition expansions. We have a 40 facts video on the Sensei and the Illuminati, so if you want more information on that, check out the channel. Even though the Tyranid race was not a playable race in early 40K, the Tyranids were first described in Rogue Trader. At that time, they were not an emphasized race, instead representing a limited number of occasionally encountered alien antagonists. The original Tyranid appearance was not imposing or especially horrific. They were depicted as 6-limbed, relatively diminutive creatures, an appearance which would later be assigned to the Tyranid gene stealers. The Tyranids were not the hive monsters they are today. Tyranids had independent minds and even enslaved a race of centaur-like aliens called the Zotes. Zotes were depicted as a slave race of the Tyranids, and were also available as mercenaries in Eldar pirate groups. The 5th Chaos God Malice was not removed from the lore right away. After Games Workshop feared copyright issues with the character, the Renegade God was split into Zuvazin, the Great Undoer, and later Nekoho, the Doubter. These two renegade chaos deities replaced the role originally intended for Malice. In Rogue Trader, the original 20 founding Space Marine legions were actually only 12. They were the Dark Angels, the Flesh Terrors, the Flesh Eaters, Blood Angels, Blood Drinkers, Crimson Fists, Space Wolves, Ultramarines, White Scars, Iron Hands, Rainbow Warriors, and the Silver Skulls. Every single one of these chapters still exists in modern 40K, their lore has just changed. You could check out a 40 facts video for each of these chapters. Every single one has its own 40 facts video on our channel. The Space Marine armory was also not as sacred and unique as it is today. The Imperial Guard shared vehicles and weapons with Space Marines. Vehicles like the Rhino could be used by regular humans. Humans in early 40K could have children with Eldar, giving rise to half Eldar, half human beings, which possess strong psychic powers, something completely impossible in today's xenophobic 40K. All in all, early 40k had a much more whimsical tone, rather than the grim dark sci-fi theme it has today. Currently, I really love the grim dark future that Warhammer 40k represents. It's not something that came instant. It's something that has slowly grown through the years in my mind. The gothic aesthetic, the chaos and destruction, all of that I see as a part of Warhammer 40k, and I can't really see the 40k separate from that. So when you see like the goofiness of like the orcs from back in the 80s, the goofiness of the squats from back in the 80s, you don't really feel like that's 40k. Currently, I feel like 40k is really well established. It knows its theme, and it sends that grim darkness to every corner of the lore, and I love that. But with that said, I would like to see more of a creative role-playing aspect to Warhammer 40k, even though I love the grim darkness and I love the current 8th edition. It would be nice to have more of a narrative control of your battles. You have control and you have creative abilities when you're building your lists, you're building your armies, but that's really on an individual level. It would be really awesome to have the actual game somehow give you the power to become some type of game master with you in your groups. So not so much as the individual who brings his army, but rather you bring your army, and as a collective you guys create a really good narrative theme. And that's something that I think GW has kind of just left to us and not given us any kind of guidance towards that. You see some narrative campaigns here and there, but I feel like the old helping hand of GW in creating a narrative campaign, or something as fun as randomly selecting mutations or randomly selecting your unit types. That would be something really entertaining and really fun for modern Warhammer 40k. And let's not forget to mention that the old Rogue Trader allowed you to create female Space Marines. Your whole chapter of female Space Marines was available back in the day. Something that modern 40k has done away with, but I know the community is very passionate about, and not a single soul would object to female Space Marines. If you're interested in the old Rogue Trader and you want to learn more, there is this awesome YouTube channel called Snip and Wib, who's created a 2-part series of the old Rogue Trader. Link down in the description to that video. Definitely check it out and subscribe to their channel. Really awesome content, like top level content. So definitely subscribe and let them know that One Mind Syndicate sent you. But with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy our videos and you want to keep seeing us create more videos, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more videos, and of course you get extra videos on Patreon. So again, thanks so much for liking, commenting, and sharing, and I'll see you tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.